You can imagine, Jeff, I was very self-conscious about choosing the first passage in the first hour. So what could it be? And I came up with a passage. And you know, when I number these passages, I call them text. So text A, I came up with text A, and I already previewed it in hour 0 with the awareness of Achilles about what his decisions will mean when it comes to the plot of the Iliad. If he decides the wrong way, there is no Iliad. If he decides the right way, and eventually he does, but you can't tell yet, then everything is going to be in place, even though he's going to become the man of constant sorrow. So there'll be a big cost. And it all has to do with his mother, who is, of course, a goddess. His father is not a god, and that's why he's mortal. That's why Achilles is mortal. But the immortal mother, as he quotes her, says that you have two choices, Achilles. Either you stay at Troy and fight and then die young and then get a glory that is imperishable, or you go home and then you don't die young, you live to a ripe old age, presumably, and you can even be happy, but you're not going to get the glory. And this glory, I use the word glory to translate Kleos, is not just glory, it's the glory that comes from being featured in the medium of Homeric poetry, as I introduced it in hour 0 in the introduction to Homeric poetry. So Kleos is not just the glory of Achilles, it's the glory that Achilles gets because he gets into the Iliad.
And he chooses that over a nostos, or a return.
That's right, and he chooses that over a nostos, which is the way he describes it, the safe homecoming that would lead to a ripe old age and even some form of happiness, but for him, no epic. I love the fact that he is talking about the final moment of death. And he doesn't understand yet that telos, which can mean final moment in some situations, can also mean coming full circle in other situations. But we'll hold that. We'll make a placeholder for that. But I'm already alerting our readers that as we keep reading ahead, that's going to be a tricky concept, the quote-unquote final moment.
How about the word Aphthiton, which describes the clouds?
That's right. And here I'm translating Aphthiton as imperishable. By the time we get to hour 4, I will fine-tune that translation, which is simply an interpretation, and I will translate at hour 4 and afterwards as not imperishable, but unwilting. Because as we'll see, this word, Aphthiton, really is part of a metaphor, and the metaphor is a form of comparison, let's call it meaning by substitution, where in this case, the Kleos, the glory of Achilles, is being compared to a flower that never loses its color and its aroma. And it's a question of what kind of a flower is that? Is that a natural flower or an artificial flower? We'll talk a lot about that question later, but the important thing is this adjective, or let's use the fancy word epithet for Kleos, the glory of Achilles as conferred by Homeric poetry. This adjective or epithet is giving you the basics of the goal of Achilles, the mission of Achilles, how Achilles is going to be defined by the medium that contains him so beautifully, which is Homeric poetry in general, the Iliad in particular.
So this one small passage actually has a lot to teach us about the whole epic tradition.
In a way, it's a micro-narrative of the whole Iliad, Claudia. I couldn't agree more that it teaches us everything about the big picture. If we understand what's at stake in Achilles' ultimately choosing Kleos Aphthiton, imperishable glory, or as we'll translate it later in hour 4, unwilting glory, then we really understand the meaning of the Iliad.
Can you speak for a moment to the self-awareness in this passage shown by his understanding that if he does get the Kleos Aphthiton, it's truly going to be an eternal medium that we're still discussing today and will be discussed into the future?
It is a question of self-awareness, Jeff, and I'm so glad you put it that way. It's as if the star of the Iliad were already starting to get aware that he is the star of the Iliad, and that Iliad, as one of the two Homeric poems, is meant to last forever. So he is very aware that he is not just a character in a real-life situation. This real-life situation is shared by all of Greek civilization, and he, as a speaker, through the art of Homeric poetry, communicates that to the entire community through time. So the only way this character can get Kleos, he says, is to die young at Troy. He already knows he's going to die if he stays. And shall I give it away? He'll stay. But he's not yet sure at this point. And don't think that heroes love to die. They die hard. And it's not something they're looking forward to. It's just that the payoff is that if you do it the right way, in this case, you will have something that lives after you, and that is the medium of Kleos. And guess what? That medium is what we're reading when we're reading these words, okay, in translation, but that's what it is. And I can't get over it, even at my age, that we are in a situation here where somebody is talking about his future in a heroic past that we're struggling to understand. And he's predicting that if he chooses to die young, he will be heard about, people will hear about him, which is what we're doing now. It's predicting what's happening right now. And that just sends shivers up my spine every time that I have the privilege to talk about a medium like that is so self-aware.